The Philadelphia 76ers are extremely talented, but they're in trouble. So far this season, the Sixers have been one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference and really in the NBA. When you look at their roster, they're extremely talented. They have Joel Embiid, James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, alongside with some others as well. But although they have been playing relatively well for the most part, I do see a couple of major flaws with them. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. When you talk about the better teams in the NBA, you talk about teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics, Denver Nuggets, Memphis Grizzlies, Phoenix Suns even, and in my opinion, I would consider the 76ers to be on that list. And one of the bigger reasons for why they have been playing so well this season is due to their incredible talent. Now obviously they have Joel Embiid at the top of their ticket, and he's absolutely incredible. He's a legitimate 3-level scorer that has a nice ability from that 3-point range, is absolutely automatic from that mid-range area, and does a really nice job once driving all the way to the basket as well. Once that guy gets a full head of steam driving to the basket, he's literally impossible to stop. But he also has a really nice ability in the post with a post turnaround fadeaway, backing down his defender with his great strength and athleticism, and putting layups or hook shots around his defender, even dunking over them at times. Basically, offensively, I see Embiid as one of, if not the most dominant players in the NBA. He's just an extraordinary talent, and he's basically impossible to stop out there. He's a guy that literally has the capability to put up 40 and 15 on any given night. But even besides Embiid, of course they have James Harden, who although isn't what he used to be, is still obviously a very talented player in terms of his scoring ability alongside with his great passing and playmaking ability. They also have Tyrese Maxey, who's a rising star in my opinion. He's extremely talented offensively from that 3-point range, driving all the way to the basket, putting up a nice floater, has a nice basketball IQ out there with his passing and playmaking ability. Tobias Harris is a pretty good player as well. The Sixers just have a bunch of different guys that have the capability to create for themselves, which once it comes down to playoff time is really important to take a lot of pressure off your main guy in Joel Embiid, but also just make it much more difficult for an NBA defense to guard these guys. And when you look at the Sixers that have a 41-22 record, their talent is the exact reason for why they've been able to get here. But although the Sixers have been extremely good this year and even got a win over the top-seeded Milwaukee Bucks, I do think there are a couple flaws that could present themselves once it comes down to playoff time. The first issue that I want to touch upon is James Harden. Now obviously Harden isn't what he used to be, we all know this, but with that being said, there are a couple games where Harden completely looks like a shell of himself. And what I mean by that is in certain games, Harden solely looks to pass and doesn't look to score whatsoever. And although Harden is an extremely talented passer and playmaker, and he does great things in that department, when you're only looking to pass, it just gives the defense more opportunities to focus more on other guys and makes it more difficult on other players. But also when you consider that James Harden should be the Sixers' second best scorer, you're taking that huge option away from your offense. So if Harden does have a couple of those games in the playoffs where he doesn't look to score whatsoever and only looks to pass, in my opinion, I think the Sixers would have a lot of trouble, and I can honestly see them losing pretty early on in the playoffs. Now there even have been certain games at times where Harden does look to score, but he's just very inefficient and completely off. So if he has some of those games in the playoffs also, the Sixers are probably going to struggle a little bit. Because at this point on the Sixers roster, I see two players as consistent scorers. Of course Joel Embiid, but also Tyrese Maxey. But everybody else out there is kind of a wild card, which is extremely problematic for the Sixers. Now on one hand, they do have a lot of different guys that have the capability to step up, but if none of those guys do step up once it comes down to playoff time alongside with Maxey and Embiid, I do think they could have a lot of issues. But the next issue that I want to touch upon is Joel Embiid. Now obviously Embiid is extremely talented, there's no issues with him on the court, but the major issue with Embiid is something that has been a major issue throughout his entire career, but that's injuries. It seems like Embiid is always injured out there. Even if he is playing, it seems like he's hurt with something, or he has a more significant injury that would keep him out for an extended period of time. But once it comes down to playoff time, if Embiid is hurt enough to keep him out, that's obviously going to be extremely problematic problematic, and I don't see the Sixers going far whatsoever without their best player. So just like any other team, it's extremely important for the Sixers to make sure Embiid is healthy once it comes down to playoff time. But the next flaw that I want to touch upon is coaching. Now in my opinion, I think Doc Rivers is a really good regular season coach. He does a really nice job at getting his teams to be a top 5 seed basically each and every season. But one issue about Doc is once it comes down to the playoffs, his teams usually struggle and usually underperform at times. We saw this with the Los Angeles Clippers for a long time now. We saw this with the Sixers for a couple seasons now. And this season, I'm afraid the exact same thing could happen. Because in my opinion, when you look at the Sixers' talent, I do think they should be a team that makes it pretty far in the playoffs. But in my opinion, due to a multitude of issues, but especially due to coaching, I fear they're not going to make it nearly as far as they probably should. And that issue really comes down to a bunch of different things like the players, but also the coaching. And when you have the track record that Doc Rivers has as being successful at times, but for the most part underperforming in the playoffs, that's obviously going to be a major concern. But although there are a couple of different issues that I do have with the Sixers, I do at the end of the day think they still have potential to make it far in the playoffs. Because I think based upon the talent they have on the roster, they should be a championship team or bust. Now a lot of these guys that the Sixers have been on the team for a decent amount of time, and they do have that previous experience, and although they have failed, at least they gained that experience. So at this point, the Sixers really just need to win an NBA championship. And if they aren't able to do so, the season has to be a failure. But I think what the Sixers should do in order to give themselves the best opportunities to win a championship this year is to come together, make sure their chemistry is on point. Offensively, they need to run crisp offensive sets, get easy shots for their main guys in James Harden and Joel Embiid, just give them confidence as the game goes on, and then they'll start to take over as time progresses, but especially once it comes down to the playoffs. Get easier shots for some of their supplementary guys offensively. Defensively, the Sixers must play as a unit. They must be defensively sound out there, and if they're able to do those things, I do think the Sixers could have a lot of success in the playoffs. But that is a big what if, because the Sixers have been extremely talented in the past, but once it came down to playoff time, they just didn't have the most success. Now you could blame that on the coaching, you could blame it on the players, but for whatever reason it was in the past, it happened, and the Sixers need to find a way to overcome those issues. So I definitely think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Sixers close out the regular season, if they're able to close it out on a good or bad note, and once it comes down to the playoffs, I'm going to be interested to see who they play in the first round and where they go from there. But although I do see a couple flaws with the Sixers, and honestly some major flaws, I do at the same time think they're very talented and think they have the capability to overcome these issues. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening for Joel Embiid, James Harden, and the Philadelphia 76ers. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think these major issues that I listed in this video are valid, or do you think the Sixers are going to be able to overcome these issues and be fine once it comes down to the playoffs? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.